Nathan Kane adjusted his oxygen regulator and tightened the straps of his tactical armor. The shuttle's interior was dimly lit, casting an eerie glow on the faces of his team. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as they approached their destination. Corinth, 7. A hostile alien moon covered in jagged obsidian-like terrain and perpetual storms. The mission brief had been surprisingly vague. Retrieve a VIP prisoner and exfiltrate before local forces noticed. No elaborate explanations, no diplomatic overtures, just a cold and clinical directive from the Interstellar Alliance Command. Kane preferred it that way. It meant fewer complications, fewer surprises. Or so he thought. As they descended, the pilot's voice crackled over the comms. Approaching LZ. You'll have 10 minutes before the stormfront rolls in. Understood, Kane replied, his voice steady. He glanced at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Maria Greaves. Gear up. We're in and out. The team nodded, a well-oiled machine prepared for anything. Or so they thought. The prison was an ominous structure, half buried in the jagged rocks of Corinth, 7. Lightning illuminated the sky as Kane led his team through narrow corridors filled with the scent of ionized air and decay. When they reached the holding cell, Kane's instincts prickled. The figure inside wasn't what he expected. Queen Avarice stood tall, her luminous silver skin shimmering faintly even in the dim light. Her eyes, a mesmerizing hue of violet, locked onto Kane's with a piercing intensity. Chains bound her wrists, but she radiated an undeniable aura of power and regality. You've come, she said, her voice both melodic and commanding. Your Highness, Kane replied, unsure why he felt compelled to address her with such respect. We're here to extract you. Can you walk? Her lips curved into a knowing smile. Walk? I have waited eons to stand beside you, Nathan Kane. Kane froze. How do you know my name? Avarice stepped closer, the chains clinking softly. You are the chosen one, foretold by the oracles of my ancestors. My mate, my king. Whoa, hold on, Kane said, raising a hand. I'm here to get you out, not sign up for whatever this is. Avarice tilted her head, studying him like a predator sizing up prey. You do not believe me, but you will. The stars have aligned for this moment. Stars or not, let's focus on survival, Kane snapped, turning to Greaves. Get her out of those chains. As Greaves worked, the ground trembled. The facility's alarms blared, and the unmistakable sound of incoming enemy troops echoed through the halls. They're here, Greaves warned, pulling Avarice free. Kane cursed under his breath. We're moving. Now. But Avarice lingered, her gaze unwavering. Nathan, you cannot run from destiny. It will follow you, even to the edge of the galaxy. The extraction turned chaotic. Enemy forces converged on their position, and the storm outside intensified, making visibility near zero. Kane led the charge, his team providing cover fire as they made their way back to the shuttle. Avarice moved with uncanny grace, her violet eyes flickering with an otherworldly light. Despite her claims, she fought alongside them, wielding a strange energy that deflected incoming fire and incapacitated foes without a single shot. When they finally reached the shuttle, Kane couldn't ignore the gnawing question in his mind. Who, or what was this queen? Once aboard the Celestial Viper, Kane secured Avarice in a private chamber. The rest of the team debriefed while he confronted the enigmatic monarch. You're going to tell me everything, he demanded, starting with how you knew my name. Avarice sat with perfect poise, her hands resting on her lap. Your name has been etched into the scrolls of my people for millennia. You are the one who will restore balance to our shattered empire. Right? Kane scoffed. And I suppose I'm supposed to believe this prophecy nonsense? You will believe, she said softly, when you feel the bond. Kane felt a strange pull, an inexplicable connection that made him uneasy. He shook his head, unwilling to entertain the idea, but Avarice leaned forward, her eyes searching his. You feel it already, don't you? The pull of fate? Before he could respond, the comms buzzed with an urgent message. Commander Kane, you need to see this. On the bridge, Greaves pointed to the radar. We've got multiple bogies closing in fast. Looks like warships from the usurpers' fleet. Damn it, Kane muttered. How did they track us so quickly? Avarice appeared behind him, her presence commanding. They will not stop until I am either dead or theirs. But you, Nathan, are the key to ending this war. Cain clenched his fists. I didn't sign up to play savior in your intergalactic drama. Yet here you are, Avarice said, her voice calm but unyielding. And they will come, whether you fight or flee. What will you choose, Nathan Cain? As the enemy ships loomed closer, Cain knew there was no easy answer. The mission he thought would be simple had become a tangled web of fate, politics, and a prophecy he refused to believe. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that Avarice might be right. The enemy warships closed in, their sleek, predatory forms cutting through the chaos of the storm. The celestial vipers shuddered under the first volley of energy blasts, shields struggling to hold. Cain barked orders. Evasive maneuvers. Greaves, power to forward thrusters. We need distance. Greaves nodded, fingers flying over the controls. Shields at 70%. If they've got disruptor torpedoes, we won't last long. Avarice stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. Nathan, allow me to help. He hesitated. She was a prisoner, a mystery, and a supposed queen, but she had proven herself capable during the escape. Fine, he growled. But don't make me regret this. Avarice approached the central console, her hands glowing with an ethereal energy. She murmured something in an alien tongue, and suddenly, the Viper's systems surged with power. The engines roared, and the shields brightened, deflecting another barrage. Greaves stared in awe. What the hell did she just do? Later, Cain snapped, punch us into hyperdrive. With a jarring lurch, the Viper leapt into hyperspace, leaving the storm and their pursuers behind. The crew regrouped in the war room, tension thick in the air. Cain stood at the head of the table, arms crossed as he addressed Avarice. You've got some explaining to do, Your Highness. How did you boost our systems like that? Avarice remained serene. The energy you witnessed is a gift from my ancestors, passed down through generations of my bloodline. It is part of why my people view me as their rightful ruler, and why the usurpers fear me. Fear you enough to launch an entire fleet to kill you, Greaves muttered. Avarice met Cain's gaze. They fear more than my power. They fear what we could become together. Here we go again, Cain muttered, shaking his head. I'm not your chosen one. I'm just a soldier. And yet, Avarice said with a faint smile, you are so much more. Their escape had bought them time, but not safety. The Viper emerged from hyperspace near an uncharted world, a desolate, rocky planet bathed in the light of a dying star. Where are we? Cain asked. Greaves scanned the readings. No official designation. Minimal atmosphere. Looks like an old mining colony. Could be a good place to lay low. Cain nodded. Set us down. We need to regroup and figure out our next move. As the crew disembarked, the planet's eerie silence unsettled them. The landscape was barren, with towering spires of crystalline rock that seemed to hum faintly. Avarice seemed unperturbed, her eyes scanning the horizon. This place holds ancient energy. It will protect us for now. Cain frowned. What do you mean, ancient energy? You keep dropping these cryptic hints, but I need straight answers. Avarice sighed, her gaze softening. I will tell you, Nathan, but you must be willing to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart. He opened his mouth to retort, but was interrupted by Greaves's voice over the comms. Commander, you might want to see this. Back aboard the Viper, Greaves displayed a holographic projection on the bridge. We're picking up a signal. It's faint, but it's coming from deep beneath the planet's surface. Cain studied the projection. Could it be survivors from the colony? Greaves shook her head. Unlikely. The colony's been abandoned for centuries. Whatever's down there, it's old and powerful. Avarice stepped closer, her expression unreadable. It is a remnant of my people's technology, a beacon left to guide us in times of great need. Cain shot her a skeptical look. You're saying this was planned? That we were supposed to find this? Avarice smiled faintly. The stars have their ways, Nathan. He rubbed his temples. Great. More destiny talk. Against his better judgment, Cain led a team to investigate the signal. They descended into the planet's depths, navigating narrow tunnels carved long ago. The air grew colder, and the hum of the crystalline structures intensified, resonating in their bones. At the heart of the cavern, they found it, a massive, ancient device pulsating with a dim, golden light. It was both organic and mechanical, its design unlike anything Kane had ever seen. Avarice approached the device, her hand hovering over its surface. "This is the heart of Eternis, a nexus of my people's knowledge and power. With it, we can tip the balance of the war." Before Kane could respond, the device activated, projecting a series of intricate symbols and alien script into the air. The symbols shifted, coalescing into an image of Avarice standing beside a figure unmistakably resembling Kane. "What the?" Greaves whispered. Avarice turned to Kane, her expression triumphant. "Do you see now, Nathan? The prophecy was not a lie. You are the chosen one." Kane stared at the image, his mind racing. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable, and it was staring him in the face. As Kane struggled with the implications, the device began to glow brighter, enveloping him and Avarice in a cocoon of golden light. He felt a surge of energy, a connection so profound it left him breathless. "You cannot fight it," Avarice whispered, her voice soft but firm. "This is our destiny, Nathan." Kane wanted to argue, to deny everything, but he couldn't. The bond was real, and it was changing him in ways he couldn't yet understand. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the galaxy, their enemies stirred, sensing the awakening of a power they had long feared. Kane stood at the heart of the cavern, still reeling from the overwhelming experience with the heart of Eternis. His body felt as if it had been charged with energy, every nerve humming with a sensation both alien and eerily familiar. He turned to Avarice, his voice low and edged with frustration. "What did that thing just do to me?" Avarice regarded him with a mixture of pride and empathy. "It awakened your true potential, Nathan. You were chosen not just for your courage, but for your connection to the energy that binds my people. That connection has always been within you, waiting to be unlocked." Kane shook his head, pacing. "I'm not some mystical hero from your stories. I'm just a soldier trying to keep my team alive." Avarice stepped closer, her presence calming. "You are more than that. And whether you accept it or not, the galaxy will demand you rise to this challenge." Before Kane could respond, Greaves's voice crackled over the comms. "Commander, we've got company topside. Sensors are picking up multiple signatures. Looks like usurper patrols." Kane's jaw tightened. "Damn it, they tracked us here. We must move quickly," Avarice said, urgency flashing in her violet eyes. "If the usurpers seize the heart, they will turn its power into a weapon of unimaginable destruction." Kane signaled to his team. "We're getting out of here. Greaves, prep the ship for immediate departure." The ascent to the surface was harrowing. The usurper patrols had already landed, their troops sweeping the area with ruthless efficiency. Kane led his team through the twisting tunnels, evading detection as best they could. At one point, they were forced to halt as a patrol passed dangerously close. Kane pressed himself against the wall, his pulse hammering in his ears. Avarice stood beside him, her composure unshaken. "You've been trained for this," she whispered, "but now you must trust what lies within." Kane shot her a look. "This isn't the time for cryptic advice." "On the contrary," she replied with a faint smile, "it is exactly the time." A sudden shout echoed down the corridor. "They've been spotted. Move!" Kane barked, raising his rifle and returning fire as they sprinted for the surface. Avarice moved with an uncanny grace, her energy shielding them from the worst of the enemy's assault. By the time they reached the shuttle, the situation was dire. Usurper forces were closing in, and the Viper's shields wouldn't hold for long. As they blasted off, Greaves turned to Kane, her expression grim. "They're scrambling fighters. We're not out of this yet." The Viper weaved through enemy fire, its hull groaning under the strain. Kane manned one of the gun turrets, his aim precise as he took down incoming fighters. Avarice stood on the bridge, her hands glowing once more as she focused on the ship systems. "Trust me, Nathan. Together, we can escape this." Kane hesitated. He felt the bond between them growing stronger, an inexplicable connection that transcended logic. Against his better judgment, he let himself trust her. "Do it," he said through gritted teeth. Avarice closed her eyes, and the ship's systems surged with newfound energy. The Viper accelerated, leaving the usurper fleet in its wake. When they finally jumped to hyperspace, King collapsed into a seat, exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through him. He looked at Avarice, his frustration tempered by reluctant admiration. "This bond, or whatever it is," he said, "it's real, isn't it?" She nodded. "It is, Nathan, and it is only the beginning." The crew reconvened in the war room, the air heavy with tension. Kane leaned over the holographic display, examining a map of the galaxy. "We can't keep running," he said. "If we're going to stand a chance, we need allies. Someone with the resources to fight back." Avarice studied the map, her expression thoughtful. "There is a faction loyal to my bloodline, hidden in the star systems beyond the Orion cluster. If we can reach them, they will rally to our cause." Greaves raised an eyebrow. "Assuming they're still alive and willing to fight." Avarice's gaze hardened. "They will fight. For me, for the heart, and for Nathan." Kane sighed. "Great. No pressure." As the Viper charted a course toward the Orion cluster, Kane found himself drawn to Avarice's private quarters. He needed answers about her, the heart, and the bond he couldn't ignore. She greeted him with a serene smile, as if she'd been expecting him. "You have questions," she said simply. "Yeah," Kane replied, stepping into the room. "And I'm not leaving until I get some answers." Avarice gestured for him to sit, her gaze steady. "Ask, and I will tell you what I can." Kane hesitated, then plunged ahead. "This bond between us, what does it mean? Why me?" Avarice's expression softened. "The bond is ancient, forged by the energy that sustains my people. It is both a connection of fate and a union of power. As for why you, the heart chose you. It sensed in you the strength, courage, and honor needed to restore balance to my world. And what happens if I don't go along with it?" Kane asked, his voice tight. Avarice's eyes darkened. "Then the usurpers will win. They will enslave my people, and the galaxy will fall into chaos." Kane leaned back, his mind racing. He didn't want this responsibility, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words, or the pull he felt toward her. Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared. "Commander," Greaves's voice crackled over the comms, "we've got a problem." Kane and Avarice rushed to the bridge. Outside the viewport, the fabric of space seemed to twist and shimmer. "What the hell is that?" Kane demanded. Greaves's fingers flew over the controls. "Some kind of spatial anomaly. It's pulling us in." Avarice's expression turned grim. "It is no natural phenomenon. This is the work of the usurpers." As the ship was dragged toward the rift, Kane felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him. He didn't know what lay on the other side, but one thing was clear. The fight for survival, and for the galaxy, was far from over. The celestial Viper hurtled toward the shimmering anomaly, its systems straining against the gravitational pull. Kane gripped the edge of the console as alarms blared. "We can't outrun it," Greaves shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Brace for impact." Avarice stood at the center of the bridge, her hands raised, violet energy flowing from her fingertips into the ship systems. The engines roared as the ship plunged into the rift. A blinding light engulfed them. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. When the light faded, they found themselves in a strange and alien expanse. The stars shimmered unnaturally, and massive crystalline structures floated in the void. At the center of it all was a fortress, a colossal structure bristling with weapons and surrounded by fleets of usurper ships. "Welcome to the usurper stronghold," Avarice said grimly. The crew's arrival triggered a swarm of enemy fighters. Kane snapped into action, issuing commands as the Viper dodged incoming fire. "We need a plan," he said, turning to Avarice. She pointed to the fortress. "The heart of Eternis has a counterpart, a dark nexus corrupted by the usurpers. If we destroy it, their power will collapse." "Let me guess," Kane said. "It's heavily guarded." Avarice nodded. "Of course. But with the bond between us, we can overcome it." Kane sighed. "Why is it always a bond?" The Viper blasted toward the fortress, dodging swarms of fighters. Greaves and the crew provided cover fire while Cain and Avarice prepared for a daring infiltration. Inside the fortress, the air was thick with tension. Cain and Avarice fought their way through endless waves of usurper soldiers, their movements perfectly synchronized. He couldn't deny the bond anymore. It was as if they were two parts of a whole, their actions in perfect harmony. When they reached the nexus, Cain was struck by its ominous beauty. The dark crystal pulsated with malevolent energy, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. "It must be destroyed," Avarice said, "but it will take both of us to channel the energy needed to shatter it." Cain hesitated. "And if we fail?" Avarice placed a hand on his shoulder. "We won't." Together, they focused their energy on the nexus. A brilliant light filled the chamber as their combined power clashed with the dark energy. The strain was immense, but neither faltered. With a deafening crack, the nexus shattered, its pieces dissolving into nothingness. The destruction of the nexus sent a shockwave through the fortress. Usurper ships faltered, their systems failing as the corrupted energy dissipated. The Vipers swooped in to extract Cain and Avarice as the fortress began to collapse. Back aboard the ship, the crew cheered. The usurpers' power was broken, and the galaxy was free from their tyranny. But Cain felt no relief. In the aftermath, Avarice stood apart from the celebrations, her gaze distant. "What's wrong?" he asked, approaching her. She smiled softly, sadness in her eyes. "My purpose is fulfilled, Nathan. The bond between us was forged for this moment, but now I must return to my people. They need their queen to guide them." Cain's heart sank. "And what about us?" Avarice stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart. "You will always be a part of me, as I am of you. But my path lies among the stars, and yours lies here." He wanted to argue, to convince her to stay, but he knew she was right. As she boarded a ship bound for her homeworld, Cain watched her leave, a mix of pride and sorrow in his heart. Months passed. The galaxy began to heal, and Cain returned to his duties as a soldier. Yet, he couldn't forget Avarice or the bond they had shared. The stories of their victory spread across the stars, inspiring countless worlds to stand against tyranny. Cain's name became legend, a man who defied the odds, embraced his destiny, and saved the galaxy. But for Cain, the greatest victory was not in the battles he fought, but in the connection he found with Avarice, a bond that transcended time, space, and even fate. And though she was gone, he knew she was out there among the stars, carrying a piece of him with her.